Anyway, it's good to see you all, or not see you all, but it's good to see everybody's names in the chat. Just to go over some normal things that we do each time when we hold this every month. This is called Road to Recovery. So Alana and I put this webinar on, and we invite people that are inside of our circle and others to join us. So, because there's very few places the husband and wife can show up to talk about the journey and to listen and have some Q&A and just be able to talk about the things that are currently going on with them. We recognize there is a wide variety of experiences going on right now, people that are new to the journey, and then people that have been doing this for a very long time. Maybe some of you are feeling a little bit of hope. Maybe some of you are feeling the exact opposite, and we have a ton of empathy, and our hearts go out to you if this is a place where you're not feeling a lot of hope. And one of the things that Alana and I have the challenge to do is to speak to a variety of situations, and we're going to try to do a good job doing that. And we recognize that if we speak to you, depending on where you're at in your journey, the message might be a little bit different. So if you need clarifications, if you need anything, please use the Q&A specifically to put any clarifications that you need. I guarantee it will get hit if it's in the Q&A, or will most likely be hit. We like to use the chat for the back and forth for the, hey, that you could put anything in there. I agree with that. That makes sense to me, just to make any type of comment you want. But if you want us to tackle it, put it in the Q&A. Anything else on that, Alana?
I know that we have a lot of new people who pop in each month, so I think maybe it would be good if you and I just introduce ourselves briefly.
Sure, that'd be good. You want to go first?
Sure. So really quick, I'm Alana Gordon. I am the Worth Program Director. I also am a co-owner of Choose Recovery. I'm a marriage and family therapist out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And I specialize in trauma and betrayal. And so, and then Luke and I openly share our own story and our own journey. And we are about 8 years into healing ourselves.
And my name is Luke Gordon, and I'm the program director for Men and Moroni, and also founder with Alana of Choose Recovery Services. Those companies are very tied very closely together because so much of this work blends. My journey and Alana's journey came from our own past with addiction, mine of being deep in the hole of sexual misbehavior, pornography, masturbation, acting outside of marriage, all those things. So we've gotten used to sharing our story. It's become somewhat not scary like it used to be. So we are open books. So there are no questions that are off limits. So throw anything at us that you need to help in your clarity and walking the path. And it's just wonderful to see all the people that are jumping on here and know so many of the faces. So I wish we could say hi to you and interact a little bit more than we'd be able to here. But okay, so thank you for those of you who put questions in ahead of time. There was that tool that allowed you guys to say, hey, this is how I found you. The purpose of me being here is this, and this is what I have a question on. So we're going to tackle those. Again, the Q&A is a place for you to follow up and say, hey, I got a follow-up question. I didn't get a chance to put one in beforehand. So Alana, where should we start off?
Sorry, I'm literally writing down the questions that came in so I can have them front and center. And I think that we start with the topic of transparency. I think let's start there. That's something that was asked about, was how does transparency play into trust building, and what does transparency even look like? Because that's one big thing. Honesty, transparency, so much of when we have either infidelity or any type of addiction, there's a lot of secrets and hiding, and that can be so damaging and so painful when we have that. And so, Luke, I'm going to have you start on that piece of just what exactly is transparency? What does it look like? And then I'll jump in from my experience of the betrayed partner. What is helpful for them to see.
Okay, yeah, you bet it. You bet. Okay, so when everything came out with myself and Alana knew everything, I had a process of learning how to be, I would have called it back in the day like honest, okay, just tell the truth. And it evolved over a period of time to being transparent. My goal was to just somehow share everything with her, get it all out on the table, don't make any mistakes again, and just move on, right? If she can take the laundry list of things that I did and I can just be honest, why would I ever tell a lie again? Because now I finally got it out there. I did not find that to be the case. I found it out that not being transparent, lying was a part of the way that I operated. It's how I lived my life. Dumb things, like I'm telling you, like I would just lie about crazy stuff. Like, hey, do you have a pen in your car? No, I don't. When I have a pen in my car, because it's just easier to say no than yes, or whatever thing. That's not even a very good example, but I would find myself lying about things where I'm just like, why did I do that? That makes no sense. So we had a check-in process that we used, and we've talked a lot about this, about saying every single night, talking about being honest and being transparent about my experiences that day. I found out that really quickly, this was the most painful part of my day, was being transparent about what was going on. Because first of all, I didn't really know how. And I felt like every time I was transparent and honest about my experience with sexuality or just other things, that when I was going to do this was going to be the last straw, and Alana was going to leave, or it was just going to put the nail in the coffin. So we had a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. One was Alana had her boundaries, and I believe, and Alana, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it our therapist, Sean, that told about the 15-minute rule? Did he help come up with that, or do you remember?
No, that was mine. I was actually pretty
That
proud of
yours?
that one. Mhm.
Okay. Do you want to tell about that one?
Yeah, just one of my boundaries is I realized in Luke's attempts at trying to be honest, I could see that he was trying to figure it out. And I could also see that there were patterns that were really deep. And a lot of times, with any type of addiction, our brain can be very trained into what is the most efficient way I can do things, what's the easiest way I can do things, what's going to take the least amount of effort. And so lying, just like you said, Luke, became one of those things that it was like, well, what's the easy answer? But I could see him trying to figure that out. And so as part of my boundaries, I said that you have 10 minutes to retract a lie, and my boundaries will look different. What I need for my level of safety after that will look different. For example, there was a time with a pen. I remember he had a pen, and it was, one of those pens you get from like a location, and it had a name on the side. And I asked him, and I said, "Oh, where'd you get that pen?" And I don't remember the answer he gave me, but it was a lie. And then it was like 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, it was outside of the window. So it was like 15 minutes later, but just barely after. And he called me and he's like, "I don't know why I lied to you about that. Here's where the pen was from." And it was the silliest thing. It was a pen, but there was this process of him trying to break the patterns. And so I had a boundary. If you tell me within 10 minutes, then I still get to feel whatever feelings I'm going to feel, but I will continue to sleep in the same bed that night. But if you lie to me, and you don't tell me within 10 minutes, I need at least 24 hours for me to be able to reassess where I'm at, my level of safety, and then how much time and space I need. So maybe it will be that 24 hours, but depending on the lie, it could be longer. So that was a boundary that we had. And for the partner that's been betrayed, this reestablishing a sense of safety, a sense of trust, a sense of that it is okay for them to invest again in the relationship is really essential. And this is one of those steps that we can't fast forward. This is one of those steps that we can't just, there's a book called Worthy of Our Trust, and he talks about building trust with like Lego pieces. He talks about it being like one little Lego piece at a time. And we can't like pull up with a dump truck full of Lego pieces and just dump it down and be like, okay, there you go. We're good now. That's kind of what you were saying, Luke, right? I shared all this information with her, therefore she should trust me. We had a full disclosure, therefore she should trust me. But in reality, it's that Lego piece by Lego piece by Lego piece as we're reestablishing and rebuilding that trust. And it is one of, well, I was going to say it's one of the hardest parts of the journey, but I probably say that about a lot of pieces. There's a lot of hard pieces in trying to rebuild a relationship that has had this type of injury.
Well, and as she came up with her boundary, I remember just thinking in my head and having that battle that I tried to not last very long, which is, okay, you could very easily let this one go, Luke. She's never going to find out. And then identifying those world patterns and going, okay, all right, I'm just not going to think about this. And I'm just going to share with her now that I've recognized. And having that grace period for me was really, really, I mean, you notice Alana still had her feels around it. She still had her emotions around the fact that I even knee-jerk reaction lied. But the fact I go, okay, to rewire my brain from so much deceit was not going to be easy, was not going to be quick. And that was really helpful as far as transparent. So that was transparent as far as in the moment, daily interaction with Alana. And then you had the other transparent, which was nightly check-ins, which was around my sexuality. Not saying sexuality couldn't exist of them minimizing and lying during the day, but it was saying, all right, when it comes to abstinence, when it comes to lust, this is what my experience was this day. Not details, but also not sugarcoating and pretending like I wasn't having a sexual experience and not noticing what was going on. And I could share with her what it looked like. This was a hard time in the beginning, because what would happen is Alana married somebody who was, Alana married me, and I was used to just projecting one side of me, which is everything's fine, everything's okay. So she never got a chance to be married to somebody who shared their sexuality, who shared their sexual experience. So she just kind of had to assume what a male's brain looked like, what my brain looked like. So we had to learn, and she had to learn what it was like being married to a man after she found out she was being married. She'd been married to an addict. And this is very difficult. So we had to go through this process of learning through me being transparent about my sexual experiences during the day. I feel like there's probably a lot more in there to talk about, Alana, and I wanted to move on to something else, which is the integrity piece. But you want to mention anything else?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I want to say this is also from Worthy of Her Trust, but they talk about passive truth telling versus active truth telling. Passive truth telling is waiting to be asked or waiting to be caught before you're telling the truth. And if you are asked, then, okay, I'll give you the information. And even within that, there can be different levels of, I'm giving you just what I want you to hear. I'm giving you just enough for you to be happy, or I'm telling you everything now that you've asked me. That's all falling under like passive truth telling. Passive truth telling does not build trust. It's the active truth telling, that truth telling that really says, this is what's happening. This is where I'm at. I recognize that this might be potentially scary for you. Therefore, I'm going to tell you now. And that piece of what will scare your partner who's been betrayed takes some learning, because when you have gone through when you've gone through a betrayal, that is an attachment injury that goes incredibly deep, and it can shape really your worldview of how safe you are in the world and how safe other people are and how safe you are in your relationship. And a lot of individuals, when they go through this, they put on those lens of, I'm not safe. And their brain is constantly going, am I safe? Am I safe? Will this make me safe? Am I safe? And so you, the partner who acted out in the marriage, you really figuring out and starting to learn and getting curious and understanding what makes your partner feel scared or what things they don't feel safe with is going to be really beneficial. So there's this piece to transparency. And for those who are in the beginning, it really is just basic level, really clear transparency with where you're at. As you go along further in recovery, you start to see other areas of your life where you may not be living in full integrity. And there was a podcast. Now I can't remember the guys who did the podcast. It was Brandon Patrick and Tyler Patrick. I don't know what the podcast name is called, but halfway through one of their episodes, they talked about nice guys, these men who go through their lives and who are working really hard at gaining validation. They said, sometimes they're almost addicted to validation, but they're trying to gain validation from everyone around them. They're trying to people please. They're trying to say what other people want them to say. And a lot of times they end up with partners who feel incredibly frustrated and incredibly alone and incredibly confused because they're not being true or honest with who they really are and how they really feel and what their experience is. So I'd love, Luke, if you kind of talked about that piece of it.
Yeah. And he talks about him a validation addict or a validation junkie, which is, I just want to qualify, because we got to set up the world validation. Validation is in I'm enough. So I put a bunch of people around me that are fans of Luke. And then if I have enough of them that say, you know what, I like you, Luke, then that means I'm okay. But if I don't have enough of these people, then I'm really struggling in my own self-esteem and my own self-worth. So and I recognize there's a lot of men that are not this, but there's a decent amount that are. So what they do is that they drive their spouses crazy, because what happens is their spouse goes, I know who the real guy is, but nobody else does, because what he does is he puts a mask on when he's around the rest of you and is this and this and this and says he's these things, but really that's not how he's showing up around me, or he needs me to be doing the same thing, which he needs me to give him kudos or hey, you're enough, or whatever it might be. So they see this conflict.
That piece right there, when that individual doesn't have their own sense of self-worth that's really grounded and whole, they become this endless well that can never be filled. And this was very much Luke and I's relationship. Was no matter how much I tried to give him kudos, no matter how much I tried to praise him and love him and whatever, it was an endless hole because it wasn't full for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. So what they do is they try to search for that. And that's why things like titles are very important to them, church callings, job positions at work, social status, whatever it might be, because those things really identify and qualify them in their own head that they're enough. And again, there is never enough, and that gets shaken. And there's at times of their lives when they don't have that, and they really kind of start to spin out of control. So they put this in, and I'll actually throw it in the chat so y'all can listen to it, because this podcast is fantastic because they describe it really well. Really encourage you to listen to it. But we go on to talk about how these men will be this well that can never fill up. But the whole problem is they lack integrity. And we always think about integrity is, you're honest, but they talk about integrity is like shape shifting. The lack of integrity is like shape shifting, showing up to be whatever somebody else wants. And they compared it to like a wet noodle and a steel beam on a bridge. Like that steel beam that bridge is made out of has a ton of integrity, and trucks can drive over that bridge, things can happen, and that bridge maintains its structure, maintains its structure, and nothing can affect that bridge for the most part. But a wet noodle is the opposite. any type of an environment, the noodle is going to change its shape. And that's integrity. And so not integrity so much as in lying as it is being different in one situation than the other. And that is what's missing and is a big part of the transparency part of the conversation, is the men don't know what to be transparent about because they're so busy shape shifting and doing things that they can't really identify who they are and what they're about, because they're just looking at others to see who they need to be. Alana, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. It's like, who does my bishop or pastor want me to be? Who does my boss want me to be? Who do I need to be for my friends to be happy? What kind of man do I have to be so my wife is happy? And like the wife piece, this one can be triggering for women, because a lot of times, especially with betrothed, they're like, I need you to show up in these ways. And we want men to be empathetic to that, but we also want them grounded in their own values. And some of the most stuck men that I've worked with have done a lot of the sobriety, a lot of the recovery, and their relationship is just not healing. And they can't figure out why. This plays into it a lot, where they're in a place, and this is not everybody, but they're in a place where they're trying so hard of like, well, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Tell me who to be. Tell me what to do. Instead of them really doing their own individual work to figure out, who am I? How do I believe? What are my values? Am I living within my values? Okay, my wife is freaking out. Where am I at? Okay, now that I know where I'm at and I'm grounded, now I can go and make space for her and connect with her.
Yep.
But a lot of times that gets passed by. They just go straight to the wife. And how do I fix this?
So I want to remember to credit where the podcast credited, which is a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And there's a bunch of stuff in No More Mr. Nice Guy that I'm not completely buying off on, but there's a lot of really, really good content. And they talk a lot about sexual integrity inside of it. And there's a lot of, sexual addiction stuff that they relate to the men in this book. But No More Mr. Nice Guy is in like, these men show up and they're just nice. They just show up in the way that other people want them to be. And they say, don't anymore. Don't just be who other people want to be. Figure out who you are. So this is where it's really, really tough that you're referencing, Alana, which is, okay, if I'm not a nice guy anymore, if I'm not going to be a shapeshifter, I'm going to find out my own identity and who I am, and I'm going to be that. That's going to be really difficult for me and maybe some of the people that I'm around. So men usually there's this pendulum that we always talk about, which is the men that just go, okay, wife, like whatever you want me to do. I caused a whole bunch of problems. You want me to join a group? I'll join a group. You want me to go see my bishop? I'll go see my bishop. In fact, you just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. I'll do anything. There is a part of the first part of that journey that I'm like, okay, all right, you're moving in a different direction than you ever had before. There's a part of that's like, it can have a good outcome with it. The problem is it's not sustainable because it's always for somebody else, not for themselves. So what's the struggle is him being able to find his identity and always doing what other people want him to do. And I'll go back to a part of my story, and I find it to be very interesting because this is many men's journey. It was only day 3 after D-Day back in 2014 that I found myself alone, separated, waking up early in the morning because I could not sleep anymore, and recognizing that my life was no longer what I thought it was, because now everybody knew, or at least the people really close to me knew what was going on. I remember not liking myself before this moment, but then really going, can I figure this stuff out? And I remember walking to the bathroom mirror in the morning and looking at myself in the mirror and staring at myself, and for some reason repeating to myself by looking at myself in the eyes, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And I was desperate to find out who I was, because I recognized with all the lying and the lack of integrity and the no transparency that I just didn't know who I was. So I very quickly ran to other people as soon as I was trying to identify who I was, to say, hey, paint me a picture. Alana, will you tell me what I need to do? Well, Alana was so healthy in her journey. She said, Luke, I'm not going to tell you what to do anymore. This wasn't working for me. And she would, for a period of time there, not weigh in on this conversation. But I'm really grateful for the chance that I had to dig in deep with a therapist and find out from an authentic side of me who I really was, and recognize that I wasn't my choices. So Alana, I feel like I got a little off track with that, but it was around the authenticity part. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I actually appreciated your thoughts on that. No, I don't think I want to add to that. Well, actually, there's one piece with betrayed partners where when you call the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, a lot of these women are like, but I want a man who's nice. Like, I want a nice guy. And so, like, that can be triggering to hear that term, but they're talking about like a nice guy, and I'm using quotations. A nice guy is a guy who shows up nice to everybody, but then may show up nice to your face. Like, one thing that Luke was really classic for was he would tell me whatever I wanted to hear in the moment. Yeah, sure, I'll go do that. Oh, sure, I want to do that. Oh, yeah, whatever you want. But then he would go either passive aggressively or secretly go do whatever he wanted. Or he would do what I wanted, but there'd be a ton of resentment. So it wasn't he wasn't showing up authentically. And so this piece of it is a higher level of transparency. It's a higher level of doing your work. And it's stepping out of being like a nice guy and moving in to a man who is living within integrity. And you can act in nice ways, but you're not under that label of
Yeah.
a nice guy.
And it is living within his own value system, not your, I'm speaking to the women right now. He's living in his own value system, not your value system. He has found his, he understands why his is his, and he's actually fought to identify what his value system is. You know, I can tell you really want to say something on it. Do you want to go
Well,
ahead?
this is a hard piece too, because sometimes couples get married and they have different values and they don't realize it, or they've never talked about it. Sometimes there is a difference of values. Like, I've had couples who have really gotten into it and done their work for themselves and figured out that their values are actually different. And then they have to do the work of, can we build a relationship if our values look different? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. But if we don't know what we're actually dealing with and what we're working with, again, it makes it really hard to lay a foundation. So I'm realizing with our time, we do have quite a bit of questions.
There was one that was put in here, but can a spouse be like, and this was on the topic, but can a spouse be like a focused mirror to help a husband see where I can improve myself? Sometimes my wife points out my flaws, and they are really things that I need to work on. That is so true. But the question is can you start to identify those on your own? You know, is she the mirror that you go to see where you're at? And I would hope that a man that's working his recovery can see his stuff, decides his direction, and is empathetic in hearing his wife and her experience. And maybe flexing once he heard her experience and definitely being empathetic, but not needing her to show up and say, hey, guess what I just saw? You might want to look at this. So I think, and it's not black and white, right? So
I love this question, because yeah, there's things that sometimes we can't see in ourselves, and other people definitely can be mirrors for us. But here's the thing too, is when a partner has been betrayed and they're healing from trauma, them carrying the weight to be your mirror and to be that person who has to see everything and tell you, their recovery will be slowed down to some degree because they're helping you through their recovery, which takes away from time in their recovery. Now, this is not a blanket statement. There are some individuals who have extra to give and who are in a place that's good and healthy for the relationship. But generally speaking, if we're putting that weight on one person to do it for both people, that can become a little lopsided. It can.
I love what was just put in the chat here. to us, to Alana and I absolutely would rather my husband say, no, I don't want that, and me be disappointed instead of saying, okay, sure. And then having resentment and acting like I'm his enemy. Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Thank you, thank
yes,
you, thank
yes,
you.
yes.
So, and that's something that I did that I didn't realize I was doing, was being resentful for Alana because I said, okay, sure. And then having a ton of resentment. And you'll notice what she said was really, really good. I absolutely would rather my husband say, no, I don't want that, and me be disappointed. She gets to be disappointed. It's okay, men, that she is disappointed when you say, no, I don't want that. And you have an empathetic way that you go about saying that. Okay. All right, hold on. We should probably go to the questions, right?
Well, yes, and really quick with resentment, resentment is really huge in a lot of the person who's betrayed. And you'll see, I don't call it the addict, because in some cases it is the addict, in other cases it isn't. In some cases it's male, in some cases it's female. So I try to use my words carefully, and keep it applicable to all. But for the person who's acted out, resentment is really common, and that's surprising a lot of times to the betrayed partner. But the resentment, like you said, Luke, the resentment for you was about you not actually saying where you were at. And so even though the resentment was towards me, it was your own piece to work through. And I have resentments, and I notice when I have resentments, a lot of times it's because of some of my own things that I'm not actually making space for, or I'm not making space for my own needs and making sure my own needs get met. Brene Brown in Atlas of the Heart talks about resentment and that piece really beautifully. So just a quick reading thing to do on resentment.
You want to pick what's in the queue? You want to pick what the questions to go first?
I'm just going to start at the top. I think that will be easiest.
And the ones that came in earlier, is that what you're talking about? The one that came in prior to the webinar? Okay. Make sure.
Yeah.
And
So
I am going to, sorry to interrupt, Alana. I'm going to post that podcast in the chat for you all. It's just going to reference the name of the podcast and where to start listening at. So I'll throw that in the chat for you guys.
Okay. So while you're looking that up, the first question was around shame. And it was, how do we have conversations without triggering shame in our partner or in our spouse? How do we have conversations without the shame showing up? How do we do that? Yeah, I love this question. And I also hate this question because the answer to it is complicated. It's a very simple answer, and it's very complicated in how we get to a solution. But, and I think we talked about this last month for those who were here last month. But if we don't have a button to something, then somebody can't press that button. And so if I don't have shame, say around how much water I drink, if I don't have shame around that, and somebody makes a comment about me being dehydrated, I might go like, oh yeah, I guess I should drink some water. There's no shame. There's no button to push. If somebody makes a comment to me about being dehydrated and I have shame around it, their comment could be completely innocent. And because I have a button there, I have a shame button with water, then, and I'm using a silly example just to kind of highlight the point. But if I have shame around there, any comment around that subject can push the button. And so it's my individual responsibility to do my work around the shame that's coming up around my buttons. I will tell you, I have big buttons around being a mother, around parenting. There's often individuals have big buttons around self-worth, self-esteem. If any type of acting out behavior, if I have shame around my acting out, of course there's going to be a button there. And so even having conversations around these super emotion-filled, sensitive topics, we're going to be pressing buttons. The important piece of this is when our shame button does get triggered, when it gets either rubbed up against or it gets like fully pushed, what do? How do we handle that? And are we doing our own individual work around our shame to be able to have these hard conversations? Shame is the number one thing that blocks empathy. So if we're not doing our shame work, it is going to be really hard to have any level of empathy for our spouse. And having empathy for the partner who has betrayed, having empathy for your spouse who is going through this traumatic healing is going to be essential to relationship repair. So doing this work on shame is going to be really important. So I want you to kind of go in with this, this idea of not how do we have conversations without shame? It's okay, we're going to have conversations and I know my shame is going to get triggered. So how do I do the work to help reduce some of that shame be in the beginning, and then B, when that gets triggered, not if, but when that gets triggered, how do I do my own work? So in that moment, I'm not causing further damage to myself or my spouse. You want to build on that, Luke?
Yeah. I'll just really quickly. So one of the faulty core beliefs of an addict is that I'm a bad and unworthy person. So in order to stay in sexual addiction, you have to believe that to a certain extent, probably a lot. Think about it. If you're in a conversation with your spouse and your whole thoughts are I'm a bad and unworthy person, it's just complete shame, and you'll never be able to be there. Restitution, reconciliation will never happen because you can't hear your wife. You can't be there and be present when she shares those things. So just the simple concept, not easy to follow through on, is this isn't about me when she shares her pain. This is about her and her experience. So I'm going to put myself off to the side. I'm going to be present and recognize that I have to become shame resilient. And that's through one-on-one work, through group work. That isn't just from being tougher.
There, I'm noticing a question came in specifically around our last topic. So I want to come back. I want to do that one before we get too off topic, if that's okay. So the question is would it also be important to discuss who we want to be? I mean, being authentic in terms of who we are is crucial, but also who do we want to be? There are men who can say, I'm a man who watches porn, but is that who he wants to be? And absolutely, it is that forward thinking. And really it's who am I underneath the watching porn? Porn is not the problem. Even though it can cause a lot of problems, porn is not the problem. Porn is a solution to some other problem. In the book, oh shoot, what is that other book?
Which one?
Around, oh, it's gonna drive me nuts. I'll look it up in a minute on my Audible. But we have to, a lot of times sexual acting out is usually rooted in a good, wholesome, pure desire for something that we actually need that's healthy, that's gone astray. And so understanding ourselves and what's underneath all of this is going to be really important. And having this, who do I want to be? And who am I underneath my choices? That's kind of the work we're talking about.
There you go, Alana. Unwanted.
Unwanted. Yeah. By Jay Stringer. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for putting that in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. On to the next one.
Yeah. Question. Can full recovery happen without a 12-step recovery program?
Let's talk about what a 12-step recovery program does. A retail 12-step recovery program gives a process for change, by starting with hope, understanding what got you there, recognizing what change needs to happen. It's about making amends. It's about a process to move forward. So there are those steps outside of it. That is possible outside of a 12-step group. Okay. So that's not the only place you can find it. I think it is. Alana and I have talked about this a lot, if you've heard us before, which is it's a really good place once you have sobriety to show up and to work a process for real change. So the answer is it can be found somewhere else, but it's an excellent place to get healing.
In my experience, it's less about which particular program they do and more about where is their heart and are they accessing and getting the tools. Because there's a lot of different good programs out there that offer tools and they get packaged differently, but it's more about where is the individual and how much is their heart open and what work are they willing to do and at what level are they willing to look at themselves.
Yeah, and like therapists and coaches and groups, they're not all created equal. So find a great one, find one where you feel like you can go there and share the ugly, and you can live through that experience and actually maybe you can attempt to go back. And Alana and I run some group support, and it might not be for everybody. So 12-step may be for you, may not. The only thing I have to say about 12 steps is there are a lot of different types of 12-step group. There's ARP 12-step. There's, I don't know, traditional SA 12-step. There's SAL 12-step. There's a SAL Lifeline. There are a lot of 12-step groups out there. But if you ever want some conversations around that, touch base with Alana and I, and we can help you navigate to a solid group depending on where you're at. Okay. Which one's next, Alana?
So this one came in, it said, this was in the chat, but I wanted to touch on it. It said, my husband insists he has no shame. Is it possible for him to learn empathy in the absence of shame?
I would love the context of that conversation, right? Because to be human is to experience shame. Okay.
Can I just jump in really quick on just like what you said there? To be human means we have some level of shame. So if we have zero shame, like we truly have zero shame, then we can fall under the category of like a sociopath who has no remorse, no regret, no shame. So I just keep going, but it's some level of shame is very human and
so sometimes
necessary.
Sometimes words, I think we're both excited about this question, Alana, because we're both jumping into it. So I think a big part of this is definitions. Words matter, right? So what is shame? Can we identify it? Can two people have their definition? And this is interesting with a couple is let's define some words. And do we try to convince the other person what the word is, right? Like what's porn? What is masturbation? And you think that
what is cheating?
Like, what is cheating? What is lust? And a lot of times it'd be like, I can't believe we have to define this, because in my mind it makes sense, but two people have to hear the other person to define what it is. So I think I'm pulling shame into this bucket of let's talk about what it is. And my knee-jerk reaction is yeah, shame's a part of my human experience. It still is today, but I've become pretty shame resilient and I can recognize it pretty well, and it still exists for me big time.
So I'd be so curious to dig in. When I have an individual who has no shame, I'm really curious to dig in, like you said, Luke, what are your definitions? But also, is there a level of not being aware of where we might actually have shame and what shame actually is? Because I remember Brene Brown, when she came out with the book, it might have been The Gifts of Imperfection. It was one of her first books, but I remember reading it and going like, oh, that's shame. Oh yeah, I struggle with that. Like she was talking about perfectionism, and perfectionism is a form of shame. And recognizing ways with that I definitely have had shame show up. So there might be a level too of just not quite understanding where and how it shows up.
Yeah, for sure. I have a really, really good friend of mine, and his mother swears up and down she doesn't have shame. And he's done a lot of his own work, and it drives him absolutely crazy because he's like, I can see this in my mom 5 different ways. I can tell he really wants to convince his mom that she has shame. But I also recognize that she's not in a spot to really understand that. So what's really sad is he can only get so close to her, and it's his own mother, when she can't see shame show up in her own life. So he has to do a lot of work around recognizing the level of, and I feel for the person who put this question in there, because what I'm saying with him is he can recognize he can only have so much intimacy, emotional and psychological intimacy with his mother when she isn't aware of actually what emotionally is happening with her. Yeah. Okay. All right. We got about 13 minutes left, Alana. We gonna be able to make it through these?
Yeah. Okay. So, question, does it make sense sometimes for the husband and wife to take turns being in the home during a separation in order for the kids to stay in the home? What would the downsides be, if any?
Would you touch on this first, Alana?
Yeah, I actually love when couples can do this. If there's going to be a separation of husband and wife or partners living separately, I am a big fan of letting the kids' life stay as normal as possible. So he's there for a week or she's there for a week, and then we alternate who's there. Because again, it lets the kids, they get to stay with their own stuff. They get to stay with their own room. Their life is disrupted as least as possible. So it really, that's compassionate towards the children. That being said, like, yes, it is hard for the couple of going back and forth and who's going to stay where. But the alternative is if one person completely moves out, and for the length of the separation, that's another important thing to take into consideration. But in a lot of couples I see who have lived separately, there's not always a place for the kids to go to visit the parent who has left. And so then the kids either miss out on time with that parent, or they're going to a place that's uncomfortable, new, or doesn't really fit them. So when we're keeping kids in mind, I like this solution. Downsides would be of you always feeling like you're on the go or in chaos or moving and never getting settled. But it's going to be you or your kids who have that feeling if kids are transferring back and forth to spend time with both parents. And I know not in all cases that is what happens. So this, like when it comes to separations, is really individualized, but I have no problem if it works for the couple. If we can put the kids first in that area, I'm 100% on board with protecting our kids.
And I just want to give, this is going to sound a little funny, maybe, plug for separation. The separation doesn't, for you men out there who are in the process, separation doesn't mean the end. I thought when Alana separated that this was the beginning of the end, and it could have been, but it also can be a very healthy, important part when there's a lot of double burn victim stuff going on, when there's a lot of hurt people kind of thing, when there just needs to be a little bit more space to get some individual healing done. So separation doesn't mean the end. And then if you're the person that did the betraying, remember, please lead in the restitution and the reconciliation part, that your comfort makes sense to come last. There are some extra things, an extra part of the journey, and it's going to be uncomfortable. I've seen a lot of men live out of their cars. I'm not a big fan of that, but I recognize there's some things that are temporary, and put the family first. Okay, I'm getting a little bit off on a side tangent on all stuff.
Well, just to, if the person who has been betrayed needs additional space and they ask you to leave and you refuse to leave, and to give that space, I will just tell you that can be really, really harmful for the relationship. Allowing for that space can be really scary because, like you said, Luke, you don't know what the outcome will be, but it can be really healthy. Giving someone room that they need to heal and showing them that you're more concerned about their well-being and their ability to heal than you are about how that affects you is a great gift you can give your partner. I remember Luke the guy that ended up letting Luke live with him when we separated, he was single, and he told Luke, he said something along the lines, and you have to rephrase this, Luke, if I say this wrong, but he said, I'm letting you live with me because my wife asked me to leave and I wouldn't give her the space she needed to heal. And she ended up divorcing me because I didn't give her space she needed.
Yeah. Yeah, he was divorced quite a few years before that, and she asked for a separation and he wouldn't give it. He's like, this is my house. He's like, I paid for this house. And he's like, if anybody's going to go, you can go. And she did leave, and it didn't work. He's like, I wish and I wonder if I would have given her that space. So that was one of the contributing factors allowing me to live there. But I remember leaving. I remember that day of leaving, the separation, that packing my stuff up, putting it in my white Honda. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. And it took me a while to find this man, somebody that was going to let me in. So it's, there's none of this journey that's easy. But I remember I'm grateful, and I'm not going to take credit for the fact of not questioning Alana or saying, no, this is my house. And I think I did it because I felt like I didn't have a choice. I'd done such crazy stuff that for me to put my foot down, that would have been very unwise. But I'm grateful that I gave her that space instead of pushing back.
Yeah. Okay. And the person who put that question, if you have follow-up questions, let us know. Okay. Next one is, where can a man go to learn empathy?
I'm going to plug one of my men's courses that we have, which is called Choose 180. If you're in Men of Moroni, we actually have a course called Men of Moroni Rising. And these courses are around emotional intelligence and managing emotions, especially when it comes to being in a relationship with somebody else, when there's a lot of triggers. Maybe men with some sobriety, and they're questioning like why their marriage isn't better when they're sober. And a lot of this empathy building can come from watching other men that are attempting to have empathy. So there's groups for that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and one-on-one conversations too.
And then Hallie Roderick, she's a betrayal trauma coach for Choose Recovery, and she also works with Worth. She has a 4-week course called Responding to Your Wife's Triggers. So it's just 4 weeks, 4 lessons. I don't think she has any live right now, but you can get on a wait list. And I think she's starting another one probably in summer, I would guess. So there's that. And then I have starting this Saturday, a 12-week course going a little more diving in depth on understanding betrayal trauma, having empathy, how to build that consistency over time, and how to have the empathy for your spouse. So that's a 12-week course, and that's for men on Saturday mornings. So there's a Choose 180 group with Luke, and also Sai does one. And those are just ongoing. So you can just join those and stay in it, or then there's a couple of those classes. So
let's see, the triggers class has started and already had first 2 sessions. Okay.
Right. She does the class, the 4-week class. She does it every few months. And so the one that's already going, we can't sign up for that, but usually she does it again. So my guess, she'll do her next one probably in summer.
I do want to give you a tool rather than just telling you there are classes out there though, or give you a little bit of information more. The number one reason men have a hard time being empathetic for their spouse is because they can't have empathy for themselves. Okay. So there's a lot of self-loathing. There's a lot of self-hatred. Even if your wife going like, that guy likes himself a lot, he's very selfish. That's not true, or often it's not true. He actually has a hard time being empathetic towards himself and having self-compassion. And that's why I say a lot of times those courses are good, because they can understand and that help identify their own self and where they need self-compassion, which will in turn create the endurance and the awareness and clarity to have empathy for somebody else. And I'll just reference a child real quick, and then I'll be done with this part, which is if you want to teach a child feelings, let's say you have a 3-year-old or whatever, teach them what feelings are. Often, like when they clobber their buddy because they're playing in the box and they hit him over the head with a Tonka truck, you think that you just say, hey, look at how hey, son or daughter, look at how Tommy's crying. You hurt Tommy. Can't you see he's upset? It's almost impossible for him to understand that from somebody else. The best thing to do is when a child's feeling their own emotions, to name those emotions and have them identify them themselves. So then they can see them in other people, and then they can finally do it. But it has to start with them first before they can be with somebody else. So it's the same concept with us adults, us old people.
It's interesting because even narcissism is rooted in low self-esteem and shame. That becomes a protectant and a coping mechanism. Is this, I'm on top of the world. I'm like, what appears to the outside of completely self-centered, think they're so wonderful, doesn't care about anyone else, is actually deeply, deeply rooted, but so guarded and so protected, but deeply rooted in their own self-worth. So yeah, what you're talking about in that self-compassion is really essential. And someone put that in the chat up near the top. And there's a link to that. Practicing self-compassion is helpful for managing shame. So totally agree with that. Okay. So we have to wrap up for today. Luke has another webinar tonight. It's one for young single adults. But the last one that I just want to touch on is the question of, how do I help my wife feel safe during her triggers? And I'm going to give a really simple answer. And I want you to hear that this is actually really complex and takes a lot of time. But I'm going to build on everything we said around doing your own shame work is going to be really essential. But when your wife is having triggers, the more that you can understand what PTSD looks like and PTSD responses and what trauma looks like, and the more you can separate yourself out of that, the better. And I know that that sounds weird because it is a very relational thing that usually our triggers are related to, is that triggers relate or come back to that sense of not feeling safe in the relationship, feeling safe in the world. But the more that you can come to a place of neutrality and not make it about you and just see her and her pain, the better. Brene Brown has a great video on empathy and what empathy looks like and how to have it. If you just Google Brene Brown empathy, it's a cute little 7 or 8 minute video. It's a great starting point. So I think that's all I'll say on that, Luke, if you just want to throw in a sentence or two and then we'll wrap up.
No, just it's really good to see your names in the chat. Thank you for being here. Ton of empathy if there was a lot of triggering stuff that happened tonight. We know that happens. We're aware that happens. We hope the benefit outweighs the pain, even if it's long term. So love you in this journey, wherever you're at in the whole. So.
And if you, because I know we only do this once a month, if you have specific questions or specific of where do I go or what does this look like for me? Because again, everyone's at different places in their journey. You can do consultations with Luke or I and just meet with us for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And we can help you kind of come up with your own individualized plan of what that looks like. So if you're going, okay, you in an hour just covered 6 or 7 topics and 5 minutes on each topic is not enough. Or you're going, okay, but what do I need? What does my path need to look like? And I just need some direction and someone to help me get started, because it can feel really overwhelming in the beginning. Just know you can jump on Luke or I's calendar for a consultation. And that's something that we can help you at least come up with a plan to navigate.
Wonderful. It was good to see you all, or see your faces, your names again. Have a nice evening, and we'll catch you next month.
Good night.